Welcome to Flip Lesson 35 for the 6th grade. Today we are looking at the comparison between decimals and fractions. Very similar to what we just looked at with our comparison with percentages and fractions. So now we want to understand how do we take a decimal and change it into a fraction. And so as we go through this process, a lot of it has to do with what we looked at in lesson 34 with understanding decimal places. So for example, it says a liter is about 0.35 of a gallon. Write 0.35 as a fraction. All right. Now very often we take a number like this, 0.35, and it's much easier to say 0.35 when it comes to reading it out loud and maybe correcting or something like that, because we understand exactly where the decimal is then, and it makes a lot of sense in our minds. However, the correct mathematical way to read this number is 35 hundredths. And just by doing that, we've already set up a fraction by saying 35 hundredths. And by doing that, we have a fraction set up. Now we can take the time to reduce this fraction, understanding that 35 is divisible by 5, and also 100 is divisible by 5. So if I divide by 5, I'm going to get an answer of 7 over 20. So my reduced fraction is 7/20. So 7/20 is our answer here. Okay. We can also look at it in the other way. It says a mile is 2/10 larger than 2 kilometers. Write 2/10 as a decimal. So now we're going to start with 2/10. But here, once again, we have a key word, tenths. We know our place values. We have our ones, we have our tenths, and we have our hundredths. We just looked at that the other day. And here we see tenths. So we're working with this place value right here, and it says 2/10. So we're going to put 2 in the tenths column. And just like that, we have our decimal of 0.2, or 2/10. As we continue working with this, we can think about this in terms of, well, how do we verbally do this? How do we put decimals into words? It says the length of a soccer field is about 0.06 of a mile. Right? 0.06 in words. Now we don't say 0.06. Really, the correct way to read that is 6 hundredths. And that's exactly how we would write it. We would say 6 hundredths. 6 hundredths. And so by reading it mathematically, it makes it much easier to write it mathematically. Right? Another example. 1 pound is 2 2/10 of a kilogram. Use words to write 2 2/10. If we read it the right way, instead of saying 2.2, which is an acceptable way to say it, but if we read it the mathematical way, 2 2/10, we would write this as 2 and referring to the decimal. And now we're going to write the decimal part 2/10. So our "and" in this case refers to the decimal 2 2/10. That's the lesson we're looking at. That's what we're learning about. So you can work with this sample problem as you work with the relationship between decimals and fractions and how to mathematically read a decimal. That's the end of lesson